Have you ever wondered why, despite all the courses, books and tools available, over 90% of traders still lose their money in the markets? What separates that elite 10% from the sea of broken accounts and shattered dreams? The truth might be harder to accept than you think. Has this ever happened to you? You research a trade meticulously, check all the indicators, read the latest analysis, and feel absolutely certain about your position, only to watch in disbelief as the market immediately moves against you. That sinking feeling in your stomach isn't just disappointment. It's the market's cold reminder that it doesn't care about your research, your strategy, or your confidence. What I'm about to share with you today isn't comfortable. It isn't packaged with false promises or get-rich-quick schemes. Stay with me until the end, because this might be the most important trading lesson you'll ever receive. One that distinguished trader Richard Wyckoff discovered after both making and losing fortunes in the market. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. The brutal reality is this: most traders don't fail because they lack information. In today's world, we're drowning in data, analysis, and expert opinions. No, traders fail because they cannot handle the truth about what the market really is. An impersonal, ruthless mechanism that's completely indifferent to your hopes, fears, and beliefs. The market speaks only one language: price and action. It doesn't negotiate, it doesn't forgive, and it certainly doesn't care how much you've studied or what guru you follow. When you're tested, and you will be tested, the only thing that matters is your response, your psychology, your discipline. What you're about to discover might surprise you, but the overwhelming majority of traders fail for one fundamental reason: they repeatedly violate basic principles of discipline and risk management. Not occasionally, but consistently, habitually, almost religiously, until that final catastrophic trade that wipes them out completely. The pattern is as predictable as it is devastating. A trader enters the market full of emotion and exits full of regret. They chase noise instead of signal. They ignore the evidence right in front of them, trusting instead in narratives, hope, and the opinions of others. When the tape clearly tells them what to do, they do precisely the opposite. And when disaster strikes, as it inevitably must, they act surprised, as though some unforeseeable black swan event has occurred. But there was nothing unpredictable about their failure. It was written into their approach from the very beginning, visible to anyone who understood the fundamental laws of market survival. The hardest pill to swallow is this: trading isn't about being right or making clever predictions. It's about execution. It's about risk management. It's about psychological control when everything around you is chaos. What's truly fascinating and simultaneously disturbing is how these patterns of failure have remained consistent for over a century. Richard Wyckoff, who witnessed both the triumphs and tragedies of countless traders, documented this remarkable consistency. The technology changes, the markets evolve, but human psychology remains stubbornly the same. The journey of transformation in trading begins with this recognition. The patterns repeat endlessly because human nature doesn't change. We enter positions driven by emotion, excitement, greed, fear of missing out, and we exit them filled with regret. This emotional cycle creates a perpetual loop that drains accounts regardless of market conditions. Behind the scenes of every blown account is the same hidden truth. Traders habitually chase noise instead of signal. They follow headlines, rumors, and the opinions of so-called experts rather than what the market is actually telling them. It's like having a direct line to reality, but choosing instead to listen to second-hand interpretations. If you're serious about mastering the psychology of trading, hit that subscribe button now. I share the kind of insights about market behavior that most gurus never discuss. The most revealing aspect of this mindset problem is watching traders literally do the opposite of what the price action, the tape, is telling them to do. When markets show weakness, they buy. When markets show strength, they sell. They fight the current rather than flowing with it, and the market punishes this resistance mercilessly. This brings us to perhaps the most profound revelation about successful trading. It isn't a game of predictions at all. The media portrays traders as forecasters, as though the path to wealth comes from correctly guessing what will happen next. This portrayal couldn't be further from the truth. Trading is a business of execution. The decisions you make and the actions you take are what ultimately determine your results. You can have the most accurate prediction in the world, but if your execution is flawed, if you size incorrectly, ignore your stop loss, or exit too early, the prediction becomes worthless. The market doesn't reward those who think correctly. It rewards those who act correctly. This distinction represents the crucial pivot point in any trader's development. The impact of this realization changes everything about how you approach the markets. I've witnessed this transformation personally. Traders who shift from obsessing over predictions to focusing on flawless execution experience a profound shift in their results. Their trading becomes less emotional, more systematic, and ultimately more profitable. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by examining what happens in the early stages of a trader's development when dangerous illusions begin to take root. The psychology that forms during these initial experiences often creates the very foundation upon which failure is built. But understanding this process gives us the tools to reshape it entirely. If you've ever found yourself doing the opposite of what you know you should do in the markets, write "fighting the tape" in the comments. It's a recognition that begins the journey toward genuine trading mastery. Let's examine what happens in the early stages of almost every trader's journey, a psychological trap so subtle yet devastating that it derails careers before they truly begin. There's a hidden paradox in trading. Early success can be the greatest obstacle to long-term achievement. Picture this scenario, which plays out thousands of times daily across global markets. A new trader, armed with basic knowledge and boundless enthusiasm, places their first few trades. Through what is often pure randomness, market timing, lucky entry, favorable news, they secure a small profit. The dopamine rush is immediate and intoxicating. This is easy, they think. I've figured it out. This watershed moment represents a critical fork in the road. What appears to be a breakthrough is actually a dangerous illusion. The first profit becomes not a lesson, but a trap. It teaches precisely the wrong thing by rewarding randomness and disguising it as skill. The blueprint for failure begins, forming in that moment of perceived victory. Behind the scenes of trading psychology, this phenomenon has a profound impact. When early luck is mistaken for talent, it creates a level of overconfidence that virtually guarantees future losses. The trader begins to believe they possess unique insight, a special ability to read markets that others lack. This false confidence becomes the foundation for increasingly reckless decisions. The revelation that truly transformed my own trading journey was understanding that these early experiences form a mental framework that's incredibly resistant to change. We become emotionally invested in our perceived abilities rather than in the reality of market mechanics. What's truly remarkable about successful traders is their complete mindset reversal on this point. They undergo a transformation in how they view the purpose of trading itself. While the masses fixate on being right, predicting market direction, timing perfect entries, feeling validated, By winning trades, the professionals focus on something entirely different: survival. Most traders never grasp this fundamental truth. The goal isn't to be right, it's to survive. Those who make it past their first year in the markets aren't necessarily the smartest or most educated. They're the most disciplined. They've developed the emotional resilience to accept being wrong without it affecting their decision-making process. These survivors recognize something counterintuitive but powerful. A small win might teach nothing of value, but a painful loss, when properly studied and understood, can save a future fortune. They extract wisdom from failure rather than validation from success. This perspective shift changes everything about how decisions are made under pressure. The market operates with complete indifference to your early results, your confidence level, or your need for validation. It doesn't reward cleverness or punish ignorance. It simply responds to actions according to its own internal logic. Understanding this indifference is the first step toward trading with clarity rather than emotion. Now, I want to explore the single most destructive behavior that eliminates more trading accounts than any other, a silent killer that begins as a small compromise but inevitably grows into catastrophic loss. This pattern is so predictable that recognizing it in yourself might be the most valuable self-awareness you'll ever develop as a trader. If you've ever felt that surge of invincibility after a winning trade, only to be humbled later by the market, type "humbled by the market" in the comments. Acknowledging this universal experience connects us all in the trading journey. Join our community of disciplined traders by subscribing to this channel. I'm committed to bringing you the unfiltered truth about what it really takes to survive and thrive in the markets. Let's talk about the single most devastating behavior in trading, the silent account killer that has claimed more victims than any other mistake combined. It's so simple to identify, yet so difficult to overcome, that it separates professional traders from amateurs more clearly than any other behavior. There is one error more costly than any other in trading: holding on to a losing position, hoping it turns around. This seemingly small decision creates a cascade effect that eventually leads to catastrophic loss. What begins as a minor setback transforms into an account-destroying disaster through a predictable psychological progression. The anatomy of this destruction follows a consistent pattern. Losses always start small. A few ticks against you, a minor pullback, nothing that seems particularly alarming. But then comes the critical moment of truth: hesitation. Instead of executing your predetermined exit plan, you freeze, you watch, you wait. The price moves further against your position, and the inner dialogue begins. It's just temporary. The fundamentals haven't changed. It will bounce back. This rationalization represents a crucial turning point where objective decision-making surrenders to emotional preservation. Hope begins to replace logic, and the longer you hold the position, the harder it becomes psychologically to exit. Behind the scenes of this mental battlefield, something profound is happening. The loss is no longer merely financial. It becomes tied to your identity, your self-worth, your ability to admit being wrong. The weight of this psychological burden grows heavier with each passing day until exiting the position feels like admitting a personal failure rather than executing a business decision. I've witnessed this transformation countless times, and I've experienced it myself. A trader holds a position well beyond their predefined stop loss, creating elaborate justifications, market noise, temporary volatility, misinterpreted news. But these explanations are fiction. The growing loss is fact, and the refusal to honor your own risk parameters is the hidden truth behind most trading failures. The revelation that changed my entire approach came from studying Richard Wyckoff's principles about loss management. The smartest traders aren't those who win the most. They're those who lose the least. This mindset shift represents the most critical journey any trader must undertake. Elite traders take losses quickly, cleanly, and without emotional hesitation. They view small losses not as failures but as the cost of doing business, necessary expenses that protect them from devastating drawdowns. They cut positions that aren't working immediately, preserving both capital and mental clarity for the next opportunity. Wyckoff emphasized this principle with stark clarity. If you cannot take a small loss, you will eventually be forced to take a large one. And when that day comes, when the market moves far enough against you that denial becomes impossible, your trading career might be over entirely. The market offers this lesson repeatedly, but few truly internalize it until after significant damage is done. Let me share something deeper about the psychology of taking losses. The real barrier isn't analytical, it's emotional. It requires developing a relationship with being wrong that few people naturally possess. This capacity to separate your identity from your positions represents the ultimate trading superpower. Now, let me walk you through what separates amateur trading approaches from professional systems and why one leads to consistent failure while the other creates sustainable success. If you've ever held onto a losing trade much longer than you should have, write "cutting losses" in the comments. Acknowledging this common struggle is the first step toward developing the discipline to overcome it. The fundamental divide between amateur and professional trading isn't intelligence, access to information, or even experience. It's structure versus chaos. The hidden truth behind most trading failures is shockingly simple. Most traders never build an actual system. Instead, they navigate markets through a haphazard collection of feelings, rumors, opinions, and hope. This lack of structure represents a critical vulnerability that the market eventually exploits. Trading without a comprehensive system is essentially sophisticated guessing. You might win occasionally through random chance, but sustained success becomes mathematically impossible. The illusion of control masks the reality of chaos until drawdowns reveal the truth. A genuine trading system isn't just a collection of indicators or entry signals. It's a complete framework that governs every aspect of your market interaction. It tells you precisely when to enter, how much capital to risk, where to place your protective stop, and when to exit with either profit or loss. Without these clearly defined parameters, you're not actually trading, you're gambling with good posture. The transformation from random action to systematic execution represents the most profound journey in a trader's development. It requires abandoning the comfort of flexibility and imposing rigid discipline on every decision. This shift feels constraining at first, but ultimately creates the freedom to succeed consistently. Behind the scenes of the market's machinery lies an uncomfortable revelation. It punishes randomness mercilessly and exposes improvisation for what it truly is: unpreparedness. The market doesn't reward creativity and execution. It rewards consistency and precision. This reality contradicts our natural inclination towards spontaneity and intuition. And speaking of intuition, let's address the most insidious saboteurs in trading: emotions. They operate as silent destroyers that don't announce their presence with dramatic fanfare. They whisper rather than shout, making their influence all the more dangerous because it often goes unrecognized until after the damage is done. Fear manifests in distinctive patterns that paralyze decision-making precisely when action is most critical. It keeps your hand frozen when you should be executing your stop-loss. It prevents you from entering valid setups because of previous losses. It distorts perception and creates hesitation that translates directly into missed opportunity or extended drawdowns. But perhaps counterintuitively, greed typically appears not during losses, but during winning trades. It manifests as taking profits too early out of fear of losing what you've gained, or as overextending yourself by chasing momentum that's already played out. Both reactions stem from the same emotional root, but create opposite behavioral patterns. The profound mindset shift that elite traders develop is recognizing that emotions aren't guides to be followed, but tests to be passed. Every impulse to deviate from your system, whether from fear, greed, impatience, or overconfidence, represents a critical moment of truth. Your response to these emotional surges ultimately determines your trading destiny. Let me take you deeper into the crucial but often overlooked aspect of position sizing and risk management, the true determinant of longevity in markets. This dimension of trading reveals why many technically correct traders still fail to build sustainable careers. If you found yourself making trading decisions based on how you feel rather than what your system tells you to do, type emotional override in the comments. Acknowledging this tendency is the first step toward developing the emotional discipline required for consistent performance. One of the most pervasive misconceptions in trading, a belief that destroys accounts with stunning regularity, is the idea that bigger position size automatically leads to bigger profits. This dangerous assumption reflects a fundamental misunderstanding of how risk actually functions in markets. Risk isn't measured by how right you believe you are or how confident you feel about a particular setup. Risk is measured by how wrong you might be and how quickly you can stop the bleeding when things don't go as planned. This paradigm shift represents a complete reversal of how most approach the markets. Behind the scenes of Richard Wyckoff's remarkable trading career was a methodical approach to position sizing that contradicted conventional wisdom. He never entered a position with full size from the start, regardless of how compelling the setup appeared. Instead, he tested the waters, waited for confirmation, and allowed the market to prove him right before increasing his exposure. This incremental approach wasn't born from hesitation or fear, but from profound respect for market uncertainty. Wyckoff understood that the initial movement after entry often reveals information that wasn't visible beforehand. By scaling in rather than committing fully, he created space for adaptation rather than being locked into a rigid position. The transformation in a trader's journey often hinges on this precise revelation. Confidence not backed by proper position sizing isn't strategy, it's just unnecessary exposure. Those who survive long-term aren't necessarily those with the highest winning percentage, but those who manage their risk with mathematical precision on every single trade. I've watched traders enter with maximum size on unconfirmed setups only to panic at the first sign of adverse movement. The trade might have been technically valid, but their position was simply too large to withstand normal market volatility. They didn't lose because their analysis was wrong. They lost because they bet too much on being right too quickly. Let's shift our focus to another critical dimension of trading psychology: how we process and learn from losses. Every trader loses. This statement isn't motivational or philosophical, it's mathematical certainty. What separates successful traders from the failed majority isn't the absence of losses, but what happens in their aftermath. When most traders experience a significant loss, they immediately look outward for something to blame: market manipulation, unexpected news, poor execution, bad timing, or simple bad luck. Rarely do they look inward at their own decision-making process, emotional state, or adherence to their system. This external attribution represents a missed opportunity of profound importance. A loss is not evidence of failure, it's valuable data. It tells you whether your system is fundamentally sound, whether your discipline held under pressure, and whether you respected the structure you claimed to follow. Ignoring this feedback is perhaps the most expensive mistake a trader can make. I remember taking a loss that wiped out weeks of careful gains. It was painful, But instead of burying the experience, I documented everything: the setup, my emotional state before entry, the reasoning behind my position size, and most importantly, where I deviated from my established rules. That process was brutally honest, but created clarity that made me significantly stronger. Let's examine another critical aspect of trading psychology that trips up even experienced market participants: the ability to exercise patience and selectivity rather than forcing activity when conditions don't warrant it. If you've ever taken a significant loss and truly studied what went wrong instead of just moving on, write "learned from loss" in the comments. This willingness to extract wisdom from painful experiences is what ultimately transforms trading results. One of the most dangerous habits that silently erodes trading accounts is the psychological need to always be in a trade. This compulsion creates a continuous stream of suboptimal decisions that collectively guarantee failure over time. The revelation that transformed my approach was understanding that doing nothing is often the most profitable decision you can make. Richard Wyckoff mastered the art of patience in an era when information moved slowly and opportunities were less frequent than today. He learned to wait, sometimes for extended periods, until the setup was pristine and market conditions aligned perfectly with his methodology. This selective approach contradicts our natural inclination toward constant activity. The mindset shift required here is substantial. Most traders overtrade not because genuine opportunities are abundant, but because they fear missing out. The market creates a constant stream of movement, and sitting on your hands while others appear to be profiting triggers a primal fear of being left behind. This emotional response pushes traders into substandard setups that would normally be rejected. Behind the scenes of this behavior pattern lies a profound misunderstanding of how trading profits are actually generated. You aren't paid for activity, you're paid for accuracy, and accuracy requires patience, the discipline to wait for genuine edge rather than manufactured opportunity. This distinction separates professionals from the perpetually struggling majority. I remember periods in my own journey when I felt compelled to find a trade every day, convinced that consistency of activity would lead to consistency of results. The transformation came when I realized that my best results invariably came from periods of selective engagement rather than constant participation. Some of my largest profits emerged from trades I waited days or weeks to enter, while impulsive positions rarely yielded significant returns. Let's explore another critical psychological vulnerability that derails trading success: borrowed conviction. The market doesn't reward second-hand confidence, it only responds to your actions. And when those actions are based on someone else's analysis rather than your own understanding, you're essentially flying blind. When you rely on external thinking, whether from analysts, friends, or social media, you abandon your own analytical process. You stop asking critical questions. You cease examining the evidence objectively. Instead, you become passive, implementing someone else's strategy without the foundation to adjust when conditions change. Wyckoff developed an extraordinary ability to filter out noise and focus on the only information source that truly mattered: price action itself. He learned to trust the tape above all else. It revealed intention, pressure, exhaustion, and strength without the distortion of headlines or commentary. This direct relationship with market movement created clarity that opinion-based trading can never provide. The revelation here isn't just about information sources, but about ownership of decisions. When you trade based on borrowed conviction, you lack the emotional foundation to withstand pressure. The moment the position moves against you, doubt creeps in because the reasoning wasn't yours to begin with. Without personal understanding, you have no framework for managing adversity. Let's now explore what might be the single most important rule in trading: a principle so simple yet so difficult to implement that it alone separates those who succeed from those who eventually fail. This foundational concept touches every aspect of trading psychology and performance. If you found yourself constantly jumping from trade to trade without giving yourself permission to wait for ideal conditions, type "practicing patience" in the comments. Acknowledging this tendency is the first step toward developing the selective discipline that sustainable trading requires. There's a rule in trading so fundamental that it's practically a cliché. Cut your losses short and let your profits run. Most traders have heard this axiom countless times. They nod in agreement. They repeat it to others with conviction. But when actual pressure arrives, when positions move and emotions surge, they do precisely the opposite. They cut their winners prematurely and hold their losers indefinitely. This behavioral contradiction represents the ultimate revelation about trading psychology. The rule isn't just a clever slogan. It's the very foundation of survival in markets. It exists because of a fundamental truth. Market movement is inherently unpredictable. And in an environment where certainty is impossible, the only reliable path to profitability is limiting damage while allowing strength to compound. The transformation required here is profound. It demands rewiring natural human tendencies that evolved for entirely different purposes. Fear tells us to take profit quickly to avoid losing what we've gained. Hope whispers that we should give losing positions more time to recover. Both impulses feel entirely rational in the moment, but both lead to mathematical failure over time. Behind the scenes of successful trading careers lies one consistent pattern: the disciplined implementation of this principle. When I followed this rule rigorously, cutting losses without hesitation while giving profitable trades room to develop, my equity curve showed steady progress rather than the sawtooth pattern that characterizes most accounts. The impact of this principle extends beyond individual trades to shape your entire relationship with markets. Mastering just this one behavior, the ability to cut losses quickly while allowing profits to accumulate, separates you from approximately 90% of market participants. This isn't hyperbole, it's observable reality. The vast majority simply cannot override their emotional programming consistently enough to execute this strategy. Let me be clear about something that's rarely discussed in trading education. The edge in this business isn't hidden in obscure indicators or complex systems. It's hiding in plain sight within timeless principles that everyone knows but few can implement. The challenge isn't knowledge, it's execution under pressure. The core behaviors that separate those who build sustainable trading careers from those who eventually disappear are remarkably consistent. Cutting losses without hesitation, letting profits grow without fear, trading with structure rather than impulse, ignoring market noise, and acting with discipline rather than emotion. These aren't tactical tips or temporary advantages. They're enduring principles that have remained unchanged since Richard Wyckoff's era and will likely remain relevant as long as humans participate in markets. They don't age. They don't require updating. They work because they align with market realities while accounting for human psychological tendencies. The journey toward implementing these principles isn't linear or comfortable. It requires repeatedly facing your own limitations and biases. It demands the humility to acknowledge mistakes quickly and the courage to stay with uncomfortable positions when they're working. Most traders want easier answers, technical shortcuts that bypass this developmental process. But such shortcuts invariably lead back to the same fundamental requirements. Let me walk you through how these principles manifest in real-world scenarios and the specific decision points where most traders deviate from optimal behavior, often without realizing they're sabotaging their own results. If you recognize the struggle between what you know you should do cut losses quickly and let winners run. And what you actually do under pressure, type principle versus practice in the comments. This acknowledgement of the gap between knowledge and execution is where real growth begins. The market offers its lessons repeatedly, but few traders truly internalize them until they've paid the tuition in lost capital and confidence. What we've explored together isn't just theory, it's the distilled wisdom from countless market cycles, psychological battles, and the observed patterns of both success and failure. If something in this discussion resonated with you, if you recognized your own trading behaviors in these patterns, know that awareness is the critical first step toward transformation. The path isn't about finding some secret strategy, but about implementing these timeless principles with consistency and discipline. I create these videos because I believe deeply that understanding market psychology can transform not just your trading results, but your relationship with uncertainty itself. If you found value in these insights, consider becoming part of this community by subscribing. Each week, I break down another aspect of trading psychology that most educators never address. If you've stayed with me until this point, you're clearly serious about your development as a trader. Drop market truths in the comments so I know who's committed to this journey of continuous improvement. Your engagement helps shape future content focused on the psychological aspects of trading that matter most. If this conversation provided value, a simple like tells the algorithm to share these ideas with others on the same path. Not for my benefit, but for theirs, because understanding these principles earlier rather than later can save years of unnecessary struggle. There's a video right here that explores the specific psychological triggers that cause traders to break their own rules. Click and continue with me there to build on what we've discussed today. The journey toward trading mastery isn't about information, it's about implementation. And I'd be honored to continue exploring that path with you.